Hi folks, ThriceRisen here with a long overdue deck tech. Today we'll be talking about the black deck. And I call it the black deck simply because it's in a black box. So what is the black deck? The black deck is my most competitive deck. It is the deck that I use when I'm trying to win. And it's recently had quite a few upgrades. So let's get into it. The case is Ultimate Guard Xenoskin 80, which will hold a single-sleeved commander deck pretty well most of the time. The cut's not 100% precise, so some are a little more loose, some are a little tighter. So that's my deck box that I use for literally everything. So the commander of this deck is Thrasios, Triton Hero, and Tymna the Weaver. And Tymna really, at first glance, doesn't do much for the deck. She gives the deck access to white and black, which are essential for what it's trying to do. But she also can be useful in the early game to gain some life, which is always good to have a life cushion when you're playing a combo deck like this one, because, spoiler alert, this is a combo deck. So a life gain cushion is always good, and she has the ability to functionally, say, draw a card every turn. If she can get through in combat damage, I like to read her text as gain 1 life and draw a card, which is still pretty good. So let's break the deck down into card archetypes. So now that we have the commanders, we'll set them over to the side. Breaking the deck down into its card archetypes. How I like to do it is I have card draw, I have answers, land will be somewhere else. And then we have win conditions, like such. There's another answer. So let's just go through these in order. We have Brainstorm, draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Can occasionally use it to win the game, but it's card selection at instant speed, so it's pretty good. Day of Judgment, destroy all creatures, it's a wrath effect. And Auge Salvagers, which is half of an infinite combo in the deck. We'll get to that when we find the other part somewhere in here. This deck, before I go any further, was based slightly off of a concept deck that I found on tappedout.com called Mermaider. Yes, named after the song. It has the music video on there and everything. But unlike Mermaider, this deck is designed to maybe have a stronger late game. Mermaider is very fast, very low to the ground. And it has a bit of trouble winning through cards like Rest in Peace or Graveyard Hate like Tormod's Crypt. This deck can get really hindered by those strategies, but it also can win through them, unlike Mermaider. So, Mermaider, but slower, with a bit stronger of a late game. So here's another answer card, Beast Within. Then we have ramp cards, Chrome Mox, Avacyn's Pilgrim, one of my most recent additions to the deck. Then we have Tutors, Worldly Tutor. Got a couple more lands. Protean Hulk, also a tutor, but I put him over here in the win condition pile, and I'll explain why later. Speaking of win conditions, Approach of the Second Sun, pretty strong. Rings of Bright Hearth, also a win condition. Eladamri's Call, tutor. Anguished Unmaking, answer. Sonnenring, German Soul Ring in the mana ramp. Laboratory Maniac, because what self-respecting combo deck doesn't use it? Well, many, but alright, so now we have the second half of this particular combo. Lion's Eye Diamond, a recent acquisition from SCG Con. It's again also German, so Das Auge des Löwen. So this combined with Auge Salvagers gives us infinite mana, because you sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond, discard your hand, and you get 3 mana of a color. So you sacrifice it for white, you then use Auge Salvager's ability of 1 and a white to return target artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Lion's Eye Diamond costs 0, so you crack it for white, pay 2 white, play it, you have 1 white left. You do this until you have an infinite number of white, and then you can start doing it for an infinite number of any other color. So it's infinite mana right there. All right, so what else do we got in here? We have a Supreme Verdict, all foiled out. We also have an Elves of Deep Shadow in the mana ramp category. We have an Imperial Seal, Judge promo because it's the cheapest version you'll find. Dark Petition, my most expensive straight tutor in the deck. I know you might be thinking Protean Hulk and other cards might be more expensive, but just straight card for card tutor, that's the most expensive. Ponder, because it's good at getting rid of cards from the top of your deck if you don't like them there. Cruel Tutor, a very expensive Imperial Seal, basically. Sensei's Divining Top, again, card selection. Wayfarer's Bauble, got to get that early mana ramp. Tithe is a really great card in Commander, very underrated. Search your library for a Plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you may search your library for an additional Plains card. Reveal those cards to all players and put them into your hand. Shuffle your library afterward. Then we have Vampiric Tutor itself. Then we have some more land in this hand. Armillary Sphere. Again, good ramp. Dread Return is normally a recursion card, but it is part of a win condition, so we'll touch on that later. Hapless Researcher. You can sacrifice it to draw a card and then discard a card. It's not card selection, it's a win condition. We'll get to that once we have all the pieces. Flash. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay its mana cost reduced by up to 2. Also a win condition in the deck. Peregrine Drake, win condition. Exsanguinate, another win condition. Swan Song, permission to try to force a combo through. Tooth and Nail, a good tutor. Grand Abolisher, part of a win condition. Cephalid Illusionist, part of a win condition. Void Slime, good general purpose, stop that thing from happening. Deep Analysis, win condition. Mystical Tutor, Birds of Paradise. Nomads and Core, win condition. Safe Right Quest, Path to Exile, Crozen Grip, Lotus Petal, Swords to Plowshares, also German. You may have noticed a preponderance for German. Sylvan Library, Damnation, Deadeye Navigator, Demonic Tutor, Basalt Monolith, Wrath of God, Narcomoeba, Enlightened Tutor, Expedition Map, Elvish Mystic, Sylvan Scrying, Tempt with Discovery, Eldritch Evolution, Torment of Hailfire, Toxic Deluge, Memory's Journey, Cyclonic Rift, Disallow, and those are all the cards in the deck. So before I get into the land, let's talk about this pile of win conditions that I kind of glossed over. So there's a couple ways you want to win. The most obvious one is you just cast Approach from the Second Sun, or Approach of the Second Sun twice and win the game. And it can be made a little easier by the presence of Boseiju, who shelters all, to make sure that it cannot be countered. So only exile from the stack abilities, or maybe end the turn abilities, would influence it. It's helpful if you have Thrasios, because then you can draw back to it very quickly, especially if you have one of the many infinite mana combos in the deck. We've already mentioned Auriok Salvagers and Lion's Eye Diamond, but there are other ones. You have Basalt Monolith and Rings of Brighthearth. A rather complicated infinite combo loop, but basically what you do is Basalt Monolith. It does not untap during your untap step. You can add 3 to your mana pool, and you can pay 3 to untap it. Rings of Brighthearth says whenever you play an activated ability, if it is not a mana ability, you may pay 2. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So how this interaction works is you have both of these in play. You need 8 mana to make this combo work. You need 3 to cast this, 3 to cast this, and then 2 left over. So you play both of these, having 2 left over. Then you tap this for 3 mana. You use that 3 mana to activate the untap ability. With that ability on the stack, because it is an activated ability, this triggers. You pay the 2 extra you had left over, to use this to copy the untap ability. The copy goes on the stack on top of the original untap ability. The copy resolves first, untapping. The first untap ability is still on the stack. Before that resolves, you tap this, generating 3 mana, and then the original copy resolves, untapping it. So now you have untapped and 3 mana. You can now tap this for 3, adding 6, and then use 3, going down to 3 mana to activate the untap ability. Use 2 to untap. You now have 1 extra mana, and now you're generating infinite mana this way. So, bit convoluted, and it only generates colorless mana. So that's very important if you need colored mana for your win conditions, which you do need colored mana for all of the win conditions in this deck. So if you're using this, it's very important to have 2 mana left over, aside from the extra 2 that you need to fire this combo off. That 2 mana will either be a white, or 2 white so that you can activate this. So you use 1 white to cast this, using the colorless mana to pay for the 6. It goes down. If you have Thrasios in play, you use his ability, which says pay 4, scry 1, then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, otherwise draw a card. You use that ability, using infinite mana, to just draw right back up to approach. Use your second white, cast it again. So that's one way you can win. You want to have maybe 2 black, because that lets you fuel your other win conditions like Torment of Hailfire, 2 black and X being some arbitrarily large number to kill everyone. The same goes for Exsanguinate, which also costs 2 black. So 2 white, 2 black, or 2 blue, because 2 blue lets you cast Peregrine Drake. Let's move those there. It lets you cast Peregrine Drake and Deadeye Navigator, a very well-known infinite mana combo. When Peregrine Drake enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands, and Deadeye Navigator lets you soul bond with a creature. It says you may pair this creature with another unpaired creature when either enters the battlefield. They remain paired for as long as you control both of them. As long as Deadeye Navigator is paired with another creature, each of those creatures has pay 1 and a blue, exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under your control. So you play this, untap 5 lands. You have ideally 8 lands, or 8 mana at this point. So then you play this, you soul bond it, pay 2, flicker, and then you can untap all of your lands, because it only costs 2, this untaps 5, you can float 3, you can then proceed to get infinite mana, or infinite land untaps. So it's not just infinite mana, anytime you have a land that has an ability, you can use it as well, which is useful for both Seiju. So there's 3 infinite mana combinations in the deck. So if you have 2 blue, you can go from this combo into this one. If you have 2 white, you can go into Approach, or you can go in, if you have 1 white, you can go into Auriok Salvagers and Lion's Eye, which will also net you infinite mana, but you have to discard your hand to do that, so you might not want to. So those are infinite mana combinations. So you can, with Thrasios, you can draw your entire deck. So what are you going to do? You could cast Exsanguinate, you can cast Torment of Hailfire, you can cast Approach of the Second Sun. These are combinations that those who have played against this deck in the past would be familiar with, but there are new things. So the really interesting combo that we have, there's a really fast one, and that involves, let's move these infinite mana things off to the side here. There is Nomads Encore and Cephalid Illusionist. So what does this do? Cephalid Illusionist says, whenever Cephalid Illusionist becomes the target of a spell or ability, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. It has another ability, completely irrelevant. That first one's all we care about. The second ability says, by the way, pay 2 blue and tap. This turn prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to and dealt by a target creature you control. We're never going to use that ability unless something's going incredibly wrong for some unbeknownst reason. We only care about the first ability. So whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Nomads Encore says, pay 0, redirect 1 damage from Nomads Encore to a creature you control. So it doesn't matter if Nomads End Core is actually going to take damage. You're targeting a creature with an ability. Because it doesn't say the ability has to resolve, it just needs to become the target. So you pay 0 infinite number of times to target Cephalid Illusionist infinite number of times to put your entire library into your graveyard. So why would we want to do that? Well, first of all, during this process, Narcomoeba, which says when it is put into your graveyard from your library, you may put it onto the battlefield. During the process of putting our entire library into the graveyard, Narcomoeba will be put into play, which is very important because now that we have 3 creatures, we can flashback Dread Return from our graveyard because the flashback cost simply says sacrifice 3 creatures. So we sacrifice these 3 creatures. They die. So what are we reanimating? Why, good old Laboratory Maniac. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead of losing it. It says you win the game instead, but normally you would lose the game, for clarity. So we have reanimated Laboratory Maniac. We have a Laboratory Maniac, and our whole deck is in the graveyard. So what do we do now? Well, we pay 2 blue, so you're going to need 2 blue in addition to this. And you flashback Deep Analysis. You pay 3 life, pay 1 in a blue, target player draws 2 cards. You draw 2 cards, win the game. So this is a pretty quick combo. You can mill your entire deck on turn 2 if you have both of these in your opening hand, but you want to have that extra mana to be able to flashback Deep Analysis. So you want to do it on turn maybe 4, sometimes 3 if the hand is perfect, but you're going to do it turn 4, maybe turn 5 or later. So that's a pretty nifty combo, but there's more that we can do with it. Because you see, we have Protean Hulk, the good old meat and eggs. When Protean Hulk dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with total converted mana cost 6 or less and put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It costs 7, but we're not going to pay 7, we're going to pay 2 and cast Flash, which I mentioned earlier. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay its mana cost reduced by up to 2. So we're going to cast Flash, play out Protean Hulk. We're not going to pay the 2, so it will die immediately. So it lets us go find a total of CMC 6 and put it into play. Normally, that's going to be Nomads End Core, Cephalid Illusionist, so a total of 3. It's going to be Hapless Researcher, and Grand Abolisher. So Grand Abolisher, during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So it lets us say, okay, no one can respond to what I'm doing. Then you use the Cephalid Illusionist and Nomads End Core to mill the library. Narcomoeba arrives. Then you just do the same win condition as I described earlier. Flashback Dread Return, get Laboratory Maniac. You don't have to flashback Deep Analysis, though. Because you got this Hapless Researcher, you can sacrifice him to, say, draw a card, then discard a card from your hand. So you don't need any extra mana once this gets going after you cast Flash. So if you have Flash and Protean Hulk, you can win the game on turn 2 if you have a blue mana source. Or turn 1 if you've dropped a Chrome Mox or a where'd you go? Lotus Petal. So those are ways you can win on turn 1. But it's very, very risky because your entire deck is in the graveyard, and if they should stop the combo somehow, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose. Now, there are other things you can do with Protean Hulk because you can get a total of CMC 6. So what other things can you do by flashing out a Protean Hulk? Well, let's show a few examples. You can go get, if you have Lion's Eye Diamond in your hand, you can get Ariok Salvagers and Grand Abolisher. That seems pretty good, because now you can proceed to go infinite mana uninterrupted. What if you have, let's show another example. What if you have a Peregrine Drake in your hand, or able to be played? Well, you can get Peregrine Drake, and then you can go get a mana dork of some kind. You can go get a Nomads End Core as a backup win condition. You could also just go get a Deadeye Navigator if you have a Peregrine Drake already. If you had a Deadeye Navigator, you could get Peregrine Drake and Nomads End Core. If you have a Peregrine Drake, you can go get Deadeye Navigator. So there's a lot of different things you can do. You could get value, just Grand Abolisher, Laboratory Maniac, and you could go get nomads and core. What if you drew your Cephalid Illusionist? Okay, then you just play your Illusionist and then go win that way. So there's plenty of different piles you can create with Protean Hulk. It's very, very useful. Now, there's another tricky card in this deck, and that is Eldritch Evolution. As an additional cost to cast Eldritch Evolution, you sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, where X is 2 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Exile Eldritch Evolution. So, this card is pretty tricky. Let's imagine we have Lion's Eye Diamond in hand. We don't have our Aureox Salvagers anywhere. He's hiding in the deck somewhere. So we need to go find him. What we can do is we can cast our commander, Thrasios, then cast Eldritch Evolution. Thrasios has a CMC of 2. Eldritch Evolution adds 2 to that and lets us tutor. Aureox Salvagers cost 4. Boom. There it is. So what else can we do with this? We can cast Tymna the Weaver. What does Tymna let us fetch? Tymna lets us get pretty much any creature in our deck with the exception of Protean Hulk and Deadeye Navigator. It can get a Peregrine Drake. It can get a lot of different things. Now, if the Peregrine Drake Deadeye Navigator combo was attempted and disrupted, you can eat a Peregrine Drake or a Deadeye Navigator to go get Protean Hulk and attempt another combo. So the deck is designed to be pretty resilient, to try a combo, and if it fails, to try something else. Now, the one thing in playtesting that I'll talk about playtesting briefly. This deck performed very well when I was goldfishing it, which goldfishing, for those of you who are not familiar, simply means playing the deck without any opponent, just seeing how the deck runs. And the deck does really well when goldfishing. It has the potential to assemble a combo by turn 4 or 5 about 60% of the time. And then it has the potential to assemble a combo by turn 6 or 7 about 90% of the time. So it can be very, very quick and consistent. Now, if you're comparing it to hyper-competitive decks, that seems a little slow, and it is. But as I said, it has these answers which allow for a stronger late game. It has Day of Judgment, Supreme Verdict, Damnation, and Wrath of God, combined with Toxic Deluge to be sweepers. Also, I refuse to cut these because they're so pretty. So, it's got sweepers. It's got counter magic in the form of Void Slime, Disallow, and Swan Song. It has creature removal in the form of Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. Oh, I neglected Cyclonic Rift is also a sweeper. It has permanent removal in the form of Crozen Grip, Anguished Unmaking, and Beast Within. So it's got a slew of removal to help kind of drag the game out to the late game. I mentioned that the deck can go off on turn 2, but most of the time you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to choose your moment to go off. And the deck is pretty suited to do that. The tutors, it's just some of the best tutors in Magic. You got Enlightened Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Worldly Tutor, Imperial Seal in all the 1-drop slots. You've got Eladamri's Call and Demonic Tutor in the 2-drops. You have Eldritch Evolution, and Cruel Tutor in the 3-drops, Dark Petition in the 5, and then Tooth and Nail in the 7/9. So what does Tooth and Nail get you? It really just depends on what you need. If you've got Lion's Eye Diamond, you could go get Aureox Salvagers. If you've got some way to kill Protean Hulk, like you have Eldritch Evolution in hand, which can also be used to kill Protean Hulk. Fun fact. So you can go get a Protean Hulk. Commonly, it's just going to be used to get Deadeye Navigator and Peregrine Drake for infinite mana. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. The mana acceleration, you see there's a lot of mana acceleration, so let's look at that. Tempt with Discovery is its own special animal because it's, if you're savvy enough, you know Tempt with Discovery is a trap. It's always a trap to go in on that card. But people do it. It's definitely a card that I've had many people just cash in on. And the thing is, once you get one person to cash in, it's easier to get two. And once you get two people to cash in, the third opponent doesn't want to get in, or doesn't want to miss out. So how Template Discovery works is it costs 4 mana, and it's a sorcery that has Tempting Offer. First, and it's important to know how this resolves, first you search your library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. That happens first. Then, each opponent may search his or her library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. For each opponent who searches a library this way, search your library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. Then each player who searched a library this way shuffles it. So you have to reveal first. So I used to make the mistake of throwing out Urborg or Cabal Coffers, or throwing everything out at the same time. But now I know to get something innocuous, like a Command Tower or a Croson Verge. These aren't cards that people are going to care about, because I've been blown out on this card a few times, because people will see that I'm getting expensive, valuable lands, and they'll just tutor up a Strip Mine, or a Wasteland, or a Ghost Quarter, or any land destruction land. But if you get enough people to go in, and they're getting more innocuous lands, you get Urborg, Cabal Coffers. I usually fetch a Maze of Ith, sometimes a Core Haven, which is another fog land, Croson Verge, Command Tower, or Borsaju. Sometimes I'll get lands that just have colors because I need colors, but most of the time it's Urborg and Cabal Coffers, so I can generate lots of mana to fuel Thrasios and just to be able to accelerate my game plan. Talking about other ramp cards, we have, we have a lot of mana dork creatures. We have Elvish Mystic, we have Birds of Paradise, we have Elves of Deep Shadow, and Avacyn's Pilgrim. The Mermaider list runs Deadeye Navigator. It runs Deathrite Shaman. I had him in the deck, but because my deck does not yet have all the fetch lands, I found that sometimes he had nothing to eat. So I took him out in favor of putting in, I think, Grand Abolisher, because I needed to put him in the deck. So those are the mana creatures. Taps for green, any color, black or white. Noble Hierarch is definitely a card I will look into purchasing at some point for the deck. Probably will replace Elvish Mystic or Elves of Deep Shadow, because green is less essential. None of my win conditions actively cost green. Protean Hulk is a way to get win conditions, but none of the actual win conditions cost green. So I need to make sure I have enough blue, white, and black to be able to fire off my win conditions. So those are the creatures. Then we have some artifact ramp of sorts. We have Wayfarer's Bauble, a good old classic. Expedition Map, to go get a Urborg or Cabal Coffers if I have one or the other. Armillary Sphere, go gets 2 basics. Expedition Map can also get Boseiju if I'm afraid of a lot of counter magic. Then we have 1-drop ramp spells. We have Safe Right Quests, search your library for a forest or a plains, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Tithe, which I mentioned is very underrated. Search your library for a plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you may search your library for an additional plains card. Reveal those cards to all players and put them into your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. So this card is really strong in a multiplayer format, because if you're not going first, odds are you have less land than someone. And it's an instant speed, so you can just pass the turn and then get 2 lands. And even if you're not behind and playing catch-up, it gets you a land at instant speed at the end of turn. So you can leave up Swords to Plowshares mana and then use it to go Tithe. We also have Sylvan Scrying in the 2 CMC slot to go get a specific land. And then we have a couple of fast mana sources. Chrome Mox, Lotus Petal, and Soul Ring. The deck probably wants to have a Mox Diamond and a Mana Crypt. Maybe a Mana Vault, probably Mana Crypt and Mox Diamond. But those are expensive cards, especially Mox Diamond these days, so that's a later acquisition plan. So we've talked about the answers, we've talked about the ramp, we've talked about the win conditions. The only other card that's in here that I haven't had a chance to really use yet is Memory's Journey. It's an instant that you can flash back for 1 green. Target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from his or her graveyard into his or her library. This is an emergency button. This card lets you if you've tried the mill your deck strategy to win, as someone's disrupted it, at your upkeep on your next turn before you draw and die, you can cast this to try to not die immediately. The only other, there's so many cards that I'd love to put in here. Elixir of Immortality was in here. I took it out for Memory's Journey. We'll have to see how well that pans out. As far as other lands, we have, let's just go through here and see what there is. So these are all the win conditions. We'll just slide those merrily on over here. We got Reliquary Tower, Overgrown Tomb, Verdant Catacombs, Godless Shrine, Sunken Hollow, Watery Grave, Temple Garden, Hallowed Fountain, my pretty one, Terramorphic Expanse, Flooded Strand, Prairie Stream, Evolving Wilds, Windswept Heath, Canopy Vista, Breeding Pool, and Polluted Delta. Then we have, let's see, there's a Plains, there's another Plains, there's an island, an island, an island, there's a swamp, a swamp, and a swamp, and then there are 4 forests, in addition to the special lands I mentioned earlier. So, this is the Thrasios and Tymna. I call it Das Auge des Löwen, the Eye of the Lion, because it's kind of one of the key and most expensive cards in the deck. The Lion's Eye Diamond. It's definitely pretty important to the total strategy of the deck because I like the infinite mana combo. It's also a German card. I got it at a good deal at SCG Con. So that's the deck. And I bought a lot of other cards for this deck. You could see here. There's a lot of cards that came out of this deck. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that was in the deck that got removed to make way for some of these other cards. So this deck's still definitely a work in progress. I'm going to have to play against a full pot of opponents because I have not done that yet with this deck. We'll have to see how it performs. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm ThriceRisen. Take care.